just such an interesting time right now in the world, and we're all wondering really how to be HR professionals in a very socially changing world. So I'm so excited that our panelists accepted the opportunity to talk to us today. You have their bios in front of you, so I will not spend 30 minutes reading them to you because they are so impressive. But I do want to introduce them. Angeles Valenciano. She is the Chief Executive Officer for the National Diversity Council. Bill Dial, who is the Executive Director of HR and Title IX for Richland College. Tanaiga Polk, who is Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas. And Kelly Johnson, who runs her own firm, and she is the senior D&I strategist, and she does this every day. What is corporate responsibility, and is there a difference between corporate philanthropy and or corporate social responsibility?
So corporate social responsibility is a broad approach or strategic approach for companies that impacts employees, your customers. It deals with the marketplace, but then also those things that make the world a greater place. So one of the things I wanted to share with you guys tonight is some interesting research that's been done in this space. So Harvard Business Review as well as Catalyst are two organizations that do a lot of research around diversity and inclusion work. And so one of the things they noticed is that there's a link between gender inclusive leadership as well as your corporate social responsibility as an organization. And what the research showed with Fortune 500 companies is that those companies that had more women leadership actually had increased social responsibility, a corporate social responsibility, but then also they had a better quality of corporate social responsibility.
Social responsibility can be very broad and is usually very specific to the company culture and how that organization defines it. But as it relates to philanthropy and diversity and inclusion, both initiatives, both disciplines can really help support a company's brand, first and foremost, and how you show up in the marketplace, which, as we all know in this room, has a significant impact on your ability to attract talent. But even beyond that, how your customers perceive you. Do they want to invest their dollars with you? Cone Research did a study on millennials in particular, and there's a very high correlation between millennials and them wanting to do business and work for companies that care about causes that they care about.
Is social justice good for business? And what, in your opinion, is corporate America's responsibility in social justice? And I think,
the question is it important to have social responsibility and leaders that do that? I think once the question is, if we didn't, it's really not a choice. I think we have to anymore. I mean, I go back to organizations, if you think like, I always go back to the BP fiasco, the corporate social responsibility and the social justice of you see what happens when it's not there. Quote from Porter and Kramer, the acid test of good corporate philanthropy is whether the desired social change is so beneficial to the company that the organization would pursue the change even if no one ever knew about it. And I thought, you know what, that's pretty cool.
That's a terrible
At the National Diversity Council, we established a process a couple years ago that we wanted to identify what are the challenges with a national organization trying to commit D&I efforts across the country and also across the globe. So I'm going to read these because they're very, very important to us, and we, as the National Diversity Council, find that CSR has 7 pillars that are represented in a very holistic way. Those 7 areas are, of course, diversity and inclusion, environmental sustainability, governance, global enrichment, organizational health, philanthropy, and supply chain integrity. Again, all of them encompass pillars that when an organization truly values not just its global standing as a conscious organization, it also drives through all of these pillars its sustainability to, as you mentioned, provide opportunities for communities in which not only do they do business, but they also enhance the life of the people that
That's good, right? And that takes me to my next question. So we gave some really corporate, fancy answers, but this is the hard stuff now. So we're going to move to the hard stuff, the stuff y'all came for.
That was the warm-up.
That's the warm-up.
Yeah.
That was the stretch. And I really want to get into this because I think that there are some things that are going on right now, and I think that companies are struggling, and as HR leaders, we're struggling on what to do and what to say. So the next question is, in 2016, social justice and the political climate was high with social campaigns like Black and Blue Lives Matter, hate crime shootings in Orlando and Charleston, and a highly divided political election. What is the responsibility of corporate companies to respond and provide employee support in the wake of highly charged incidents? What are some of the best practices you've seen in responding internally and externally?
Randall Stevenson actually took a stance as the CEO around Black Lives Matter and communicated it in front of his employees during their ERG conference, or their Employee Resource Group conference, and it went viral on Facebook.
Yeah.
And what I appreciated about it is he gave his own personal story about how one of his best friends is a Black man, and they had never had a conversation around what was happening around Black Lives Matter and in the community. And so it was an opportunity for him to have the open dialogue with one of his best friends, and he talked about how he, didn't know and didn't understand it until he actually saw him on a video. And so again, he challenged, he gave a call to action to all of the employee resource groups and his leadership when he was talking about it, to take that challenge to learn from others with different perspectives and cultures and start having the uncomfortable conversations that nobody wants to have.
So I just wanted to share a couple of quick best practices that I shared with some of my clients. Show of hands, how many of you right before the election got an email communication encouraging you to vote by your employer? Okay, so that's about 20% maybe of this room. That is low-hanging fruit. You can implement that right away. It costs you nothing. Encouraging your employees to exercise their rights to vote is absolutely a very objective and neutral way to encourage your employees to be involved in the conversation that's happening in their community. So that's one very quick best practice. Secondly, I think other, email communications or having conversations in large meetings like Randall Stevenson did, that's another level. But at a minimum, what I saw some companies do is acknowledging that, guess what? About half the country who woke up Wednesday morning and saw the election results, half the country was ecstatic, half the country was depressed, right? It was very split. We can look at the statistics and the data to show the margin of the election, right? And so that's not a fabrication, that's not a hyperbole. The country was pretty well split on that decision. And some companies sent out communications saying, guess what? We know some of you are very happy, we know some of you are upset, but we stand behind our values, and whatever your company values are, you list those and you draw your teams back to what you stand for with your company values. You always go back to center, no matter what is happening. And that's another best practice that you can relatively quickly implement. Legal will probably want to be involved, of course. And I just want to give one word of caution, because Randall Stevenson and what he did is probably, A+ game. If your senior leaders are not comfortable telling their own personal story today, when there is not a social justice issue, you want to start there first. Okay, so you want to partner with your leaders to get them more comfortable even telling their personal story about their career. Something that's a little bit less emotional than sort of racial or social diversity issues. So that would just be another caution.
We talked a little bit about Pepsi and Starbucks, and they're on very different ends. Starbucks tried to do something really, really bold with the Race Together campaign. And then Pepsi obviously, kind of didn't make everybody so happy. And there was marketing campaigns that resulted in enormous backlash when they were accused of commercializing social justice for profit. What's the difference between advocacy and insensitivity, and is failing better than staying silent?
I'm going to tackle the back part of that question first, and maybe some of my colleagues can chime in. I used to handle crisis communications, publicity, for a hotel company, and my answer is going to be, it's better to do something, even if you don't get it right. Now, there are absolutely some steps that you can take to have a better chance of doing it right, but I think we've got to get beyond the fear in having a conversation with a colleague that's right next to us in the cubicle, and then the fear of, you know, as a company, we don't make statements about politics or religion. Those days are over. Have that truly inclusive culture, then you're going to have commercials or statements go out that end up having backlash.
I completely agree. It's funny that that question is a question because Scott Pekowski, who was the former CHRO of Starbucks at that time, came to our national conference in Atlanta. And he was a keynote, and he opened up, and the name of his speech was Latte No Foam. And he talked about the failure in that campaign and how for the first couple of weeks, they were hiding under tables, and they were really sad that because they had come together and thought this is going to be great, right? We're gonna solve the world's problems with lattes. People are going to, you know, black people are going to walk in and they're going to order a latte, and we're going to have this great discussion about race. And it didn't really work that way, but it didn't work that way. So it was a marketing debacle. But the great thing about it that Scott talked about was that it goes back to what all of you have said about the core values. Their heart was in the right place. Their intentions were in the right place. They already sell lattes. I don't know, I go there about 3 or 4 times a week. So they're already selling lattes, but I think what they realized though is that there was a level of insensitivity. There were people in their organization who could have told them that was a bad idea. That it didn't, and so now they learned a great deal about how to engage the world, but still stand on their core values, right? So he had such an amazing, and then he talked about how they flipped it and the things that they've done in the community and how they met with their, we call them diversity business groups in my company, but business resource groups, employee resource groups, and they said, hey, we don't really care about talking about this or your hashtag on a latte. What we would really like you to do is focus on, you know, African American students and diversifying this organization. What work can you do? Will you put your money where your mouth is? And so they did, because immersion matters. So whether that is an experience around people of color or women or people with disabilities, it's important for the people at the top to be immersed in the experience that you have every day, as opposed to talking at them. Let you experience what I experience every day. Now, no one go paint your CEO of color, but I think it's important for us to know. But I do think it's important for us to know, like, there are some experiences that can happen. So I wanted to share that because I think leadership from the top and training from the top is where you start, not from the bottom. Yeah. So to summarize, I think the 3 things to answer the questions that everybody kind of has said is, number 1, it's everybody's responsibility in this room to be a champion for diversity. If you ask about my brand at USAA, I am obnoxious about diversity. From the moment that I came in, I'm like, what are we doing? And from the moment that I came in. And so when we start to turn that corner, the first thing people did was like, well, we know we got to go to Tony's office because she is ready to talk about diversity and move forward. So be a champion for diversity. I also think as you're interviewing and pursuing your next options, again, what is not measured is not counted. When you're interviewing and you're so impressed by the talent and rewards, but you're not asking the questions that matter about your life, when they start losing candidates that are top candidates, when people are exiting the company and in their exit reviews, they're saying, I didn't stay because I didn't see people like me at the top, whether it's disability, LGBT, or people of color, they will start to turn, right? Because we all want to win the war on talent, right? And then lastly, you hire Kelly because she's a strategist. hey, here's a card of somebody who, that's a plug because you're the only person that didn't get a plug. I just wanted to say that. So without further ado, please give my panelists a round of applause.